So here's the latest with the Tyre Nichols case. And folks, this is just classic ultra-left. I mean classic. They love to twist the narrative. Any way they can, they'll twist it. So I'm watching This Week on ABC this morning with George Stephanopoulos. You know, George Stephanopoulos. And they go through so many hosts on that show, I can't keep up. Every time I watch it on Sunday, they've got a different host on there. Is George on vacation or something? So they had Martha McAuliffe on there. I think that's her last name. But as I said, they go through so many hosts. But Martha, who was stepping on George as he stepped out, was interviewing Benjamin Crump. You know, good old Benjamin Crump, the civil rights lawyer, as I've said before, who can't pass up a free lunch, buffet, or restaurant anytime he sees it. Well, she asked him point blank, even though all 5 officers in this case were black, do you think that racism was a factor? And Crump said, oh yes, because anytime they put on the uniform, they're engaging in white supremacy, systemic racism. Well, thank you, Benjamin Crump. And now we have Jemele Hill, who's chimed in. You remember Jemele Hill, the former ESPN sports babe who put her foot in her mouth? And this is at Fox News. It says here, she posted how black people can be tools of white supremacy in regard to the police beating of Tyre Nichols. And they talk about how this body cam was released on Friday involving these 5 black officers. They mention the names of the officers. I'm not going to mention that to you. But each have been charged with second-degree murder, amongst other charges. Although everyone involved in the beating was black, some left-wing personalities insisted that white supremacy and racism were a factor. Now, how you make that connection when all 5 officers were black and Tyre Nichols was black, I do not know, but somehow they made that connection. Pretzel Logic. By the way, that's a great album by Steely Dan, my little music plug for the night. Hey, you know how we do it here. This is where the past crashes with the present, so we talk about history and cultural preservation, music, current events, culture, maybe a tinge of politics. But Hill likewise argued on Friday that black people can, quote, carry water for white supremacy and criticize people who suggested otherwise. Carry water for white supremacy? I don't know one black person who carries water for anybody else, including their own. Carries water for white supremacy. My ass. But this is what she wrote at Twitter. So I'm going to read you some of these tweets here. Just as women sometimes carry the water for misogyny and the patriarchy, and I don't know women who do that either, black people have definitely done the same for white supremacy. You're stuck on the faces. I'm looking at the system and why it was created. I would kindly like to remind Miss Hill that back in 1891, during the David Hennessy murder trial, since we're talking about police here, he was the police chief in New Orleans. When they came down with a verdict, 11 Italian Americans were lynched. They literally went into the jail, dragged them out, and lynched them within feet of a Confederate monument. 11 Italian Americans in 1891. Yeah, well, we don't live in 1891. Well, guess what, pal? I can guarantee you that you have incidences in the past, maybe last year, incidents that have happened probably this year, of X amount of officers involved with a white suspect who tried to elude the police somehow. How come we don't hear about those cases? Oh, because that wouldn't fit the narrative. So somebody responds to her tweet, says, quote, the entire system of policing is based on white supremacy, white supremacist violence. So black cops in my neighborhood are white supremacists? That is truly shocking. Now, this is funny. Did you see the clips? Because I was doing the overnight shift at work, and when I get to work, I'll munch on something, kind of look on my phone, get my mind awake for the shift. If you've ever done an overnight shift, it's tough. It's tough because your body's working on a different time schedule. So I'm watching these clips in New York of these protesters. They're supposed to be peaceful protesters, and they're shouting, burn it down, talking about white supremacy and racism, as they're standing in front of a banner that says, this is a revolt against racism, stop the war in Black America. All 5 officers in this case were black. Tyre Nichols was black. There were no white officers, white supremacists, or Trump supporters involved in this case. Period. Whatsoever. None. But this is the party for socialism and liberation. Go to our website. I found that to be a real scream. Here they are talking about white supremacy and racism in front of this banner. Stop the war on black America. And this is a case involving 5 black officers and a black suspect or victim, however you want to see it. Folks, it just never ends. It never ends. Now, she went on to say, I need so many people, and this is at Twitter again, I need so many people to understand this regarding Tyre Nichols. Several of the police officers who murdered Freddie Gray were black. So we're going back to Freddie Gray now. The entire system of policing is based on white supremacist violence. Again, the incident in 1891 with 11 Italian Americans lynched within feet of a Confederate monument, Miss Hill. We see people under the boot of oppression carry its water all the time. And I'd also like to add, and I've talked about this before, how the Irish were treated in this country, German Americans during World War II, the Italians, with 600,000 of them being screened or surveilled by executive order. You had other groups too. There was anti-Jewish sentiment in the 1960s. And most of these Jews, by the way, were white. Most of the Jews in Nazi Germany, a good majority of them were white. And Hitler was highly suspicious of Eastern Europeans. I mean, he went after the Czechs and the Polish and the Serbs and the Slavs. Take a sip of my coffee here. Your voice gets tired doing these videos. It does. It does. It just... And the funny thing about that, it comes out of nowhere. But getting back to the issue at hand here. This whole idea that policing is based on white supremacy is garbage. Because you had posters back in the day of the Irish being portrayed as drunken monkeys. In fact, I was looking at some of those before I started working on this video, to do research for the video here. So, and you had police back in the day that were pretty hard on the Irish and these other minority groups, or these poor European groups that came over here. Now, Bree Newsom Bass wrote, diversifying the police force doesn't end racism because racism is inherent to the organization of the institution and its daily operation. Racism is what policing is. No, Bree, the reason we have law enforcement is to enforce the law so that we live in a civilized society. And aren't you the people who were calling for diversity in the first place? You went during Freddie Gray, or after Freddie Gray, after Ferguson, you guys were calling for a more diverse police force because you wanted better relations between minorities and police? Well, be careful what you wish for, because you got it. And now you have an incident that happened between 5 black officers and a suspect or victim who was a minority. It's unreal, man, unreal. Now, both tweets received intense backlash for both blaming white supremacy for the police beating, as it should have, while at the same time calling for people to stop being stuck on the faces. By the way, you like my graphic? Quote, this is logic so twisted it needs mustard. So the system creates black cops who kill black citizens, those devious whites. Townhall.com columnist Brad Slager joked. I love that. This logic is so twisted it needs mustard. What else do we have here? Ian Miles Shong wrote, whenever anything bad happens in the world, whites are apparently to blame. Tell me you're racist without telling me. Quote, it is absolutely devastating to know that somewhere out there a white woman is going to read this, be convinced by it, and try to use it to lecture a black person, and I won't be there to film it. Newsbusters media editor Bill D'Agostino wrote. D'Agostino, is that how you say it? I'm sorry, I'm not Italian. Or is that Sicilian? So these are some of the tweets. Oh, here we have another one of these posters. Justice for Tyre Nichols, jail killer cops. Party for Socialism and Liberation. Well, there you go, folks. So go check out this article at Fox News, these tweets. It's just unreal. how these people try to bend reality to fit a narrative because they're not happy with how things turned out when they were the ones in the first place who wanted all this diversity. And I'm all for having a diverse police force, having the best qualified people you can, regardless of who they are. I don't care who they are. Who is best qualified for the job? That's the question. I don't think this was a case of white supremacy or racism. This is a case of 5 officers, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, polka dot, purple, green, Asian, you name it. Doesn't matter. You have 5 officers who overstepped their bounds, who broke the law. And guess what? The system is working because now they're being charged with second-degree murder on top of other charges. But did any of these people who are tweeting this out, Jamil Hill or Benjamin Crump, did they actually sit down and watch the entire video? Because at one point, and again, I'm not saying that what happened to Tyre was right. It wasn't. Shouldn't have happened. But he did try to flee from the cops. That just creates a worse situation in an incident that's already volatile to begin with. So, I mean, just a tragedy all the way around. And, hopefully justice will be served in this case, as it should be. But I thought I'd come here and talk about this, give you the latest on the Tyre Nichols case. They are now twisting this to say that it's all based on white supremacy and systemic racism. How do you like that one? So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. God bless this thing we call the United States. And don't forget to follow me at Instagram, #JasonComposes, or go to Twitter, Culture Confederacy at Twitter. You know how we do it here. This is where the past crashes with the present. See you next time.